Packet Protector is sponsored today by Meter. Meter delivers full-stack networking infrastructure from wired to wireless to cellular in a single integrated solution that scales from branch offices, warehouses, and large campuses to data centers. Go to meter.com/packetprotector to book a demo now. That's meter.com/packetprotector to book a demo.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Packet Protector, the podcast at the intersection of networking and security. I'm Jennifer J.J. Manella, here with my co-host, Drew Conry Murray. Our guest today is Natalie Somersall, who somehow makes SBOMs and supply chain security sound cool. She spent years in the DevSecOps trenches at places like Booz Allen Hamilton, GitHub, and now at ChainGuard. I think she has a serious knack for bridging security and developer experience. She was also at DEF CON recently talking about securing software. Also, if you like what you hear here with Natalie, be sure to check out episode 68, where she made her Packet Protector debut talking about Kubernetes security.
Yeah, but today we are talking about SBOMs, and we brought Natalie back because she's in the trenches on this. So we're going to talk about what SBOMs are, why they matter, some of the nitty-gritty on complexity of building and using SBOMs, and then how to incorporate them into a business resilience strategy. So buckle up. This is going to be a fun one. So Natalie, welcome back to Packet Protector. And just to level set, can you explain what an SBOM is and why we would want such a thing?
Sure. So an SBOM stands for a bomb that contains a lot of the letter S's. No, it's a it's a software bill of materials. And the whole idea is like when you order something commercially, you get a bill of materials, like a physical thing. Like I've ordered 30 brooms and 40 mops, and this is the type of nuts that I'll need to change the widget from the gizmo. Like all of these like little detailed parts go into a bill of material. As software has become so much more, I'm going to say interconnected and not complicated. You're pulling parts from GitHub, from NPM, from Maven, from all of these other places. How do you know that finished piece of software, like what does it contain? Like what goes in that piece of software? Because now it's not just code that Natalie wrote, it's code that so many other folks wrote as well. And a software bill of materials is supposed to be a machine-readable format to tell you what's in that finished piece of software.
Okay, so the idea is commercial software that I'm buying from a vendor. Obviously, they've done some internal development, but maybe they've pulled in some open source stuff or public libraries or NPM or whatever, and someone in the organization wants to know what is in this package. So the SBOM is telling me, here's all the ingredients.
Yeah, that is the idea in a nutshell.
Okay. And you said it's machine readable, meaning this is supposed to be something that a computer rather than a human is consuming, or?
It's not a spreadsheet. Yeah. Please do not give me a printed SBOM. It would not surprise me if someone somewhere thought that you could get a printed software bill of materials. I am sure someone at some point has been asked. But the idea is that it's a file that would accompany that piece of software to say, this is what you're getting. This is the business software that you got, and here's what's inside of that.
Okay.
And in the here's what's inside, I guess I have two questions around that. Do the parts in that software bill of materials have some unique identifier that's registered centrally, or is it just like the name of, how is it identified?
That's a really good question. So when we first started putting software bill of materials together, we didn't quite know. We are trying to standardize as an industry on a couple of formats, and CISA did provide some guidance on what the minimum level of components to a software bill of materials is. Like what do you need to put in this file? What does someone need to know in order to make use of that information?
So are there then, it sounds like maybe, you mentioned CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency.
Yes.
Is that sort of like the primary definer of what constitutes an SBOM, or is there an industry standard or at least industry best practices around it?
It kind of came about because of an executive order. I don't know if anyone remembers the pipeline hack from, goodness gracious, what year was that? I don't, like, time has no meaning anymore.
20, 21, 22.
That sounds about right. 2021, maybe.
Okay.
The big bombshell moment for an SBOM. But this idea of being able to tell what's in software has been around for a while. There are two competing formats. And I'll say competing, but you can convert between the two quite easily. And that's Cyclone DX, which I believe is funded or kind of developed by ECMA and OWASP. So
Okay.
ECMA being European, but I think everyone's familiar with OWASP.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then the other one is SPDX, and that's a Linux Foundation project. And
Okay.
they are reasonably compatible. So, from I have a vendor that only gives me one and another vendor that only gives me the other. Like, whatever it is you're trying to store and use, that you should be able to convert between the two.
And from the organization standpoint, so I have
Mhm.
so many questions. Okay, so first of all, let's just follow the timeline of the life of an SBOM. Like, how is it built? Who's building it? Because I'm not a developer. I'm a complete goober when it comes to anything related to that. But my understanding from people who do that is that, when you put a piece of code together, you're pulling in like all kinds of little snippets of other things for, input validations or date formats or calculating this or pseudo random number generators or like every little tiny piece of. So to your point that this is not some printed thing out, like this sounds like this is a giant piece of work and file. So how do we get there? How do we know what's in the software?
It is definitely a very sticky wicket. I think is the best way to put that. Because where you generate that software bill of materials really does have a lot of impact on the quality, and different tools have different methodologies to kind of understand what's inside of a piece of software. And like both of those things combined to go, well, what does it really mean to have a definitive software bill of materials? Ideally, like best practice world, all of the things that you're bringing into this build, and all of their dependencies, so the transitive dependencies, and all of those as well. So like all of that, like everything that's needed to make a fully reproducible build. And you can
do you do this while you're developing the code, or can you go back and take stuff that already exists and reverse engineer that back out somehow?
Ideally, you're doing it as you're building that final finished artifact. That's where you have the best knowledge of that, is you as the vendor saying, or the developer saying that I've pulled all of these things in. This is what went into my build, and this is the bill of materials and the artifact, like the piece of software you want to build. But that's not always what happens, and there's a lot of ways to try to work backwards from the finished artifact. So a really good example of this is anything built on Debian is going to have a Debian package database that says, hey, we have all of these lovely packages. This is what's installed in here. In the Red Hat ecosystem, it's the Yum database. And it's the same idea of kind of understanding, like, these are all the packages that are in this piece of software. But that doesn't account for things that aren't in the operating system. So if you're using Python, that would be what are the wheels, what are the finished Python packages you're pulling in. Ideally, you're also parsing that for a requirements.txt file or something, pyproject.toml that says, hey, this project also needs all of these things too. Does that kind of make sense? There's multiple layers of dependencies, and hopefully you can kind of parse through them.
Yeah. So does it just roll up if you, Natalie, are making something that's using somebody else's something that also uses somebody else's something, or are you just kind of, is this just snowballing up until the finished product?
Ideally, yeah. You remember the Nintendo game with the ball rolling down the hill and you could get all the stuff on it?
No, but I'm going to go find this game. I was a Tetris girl, personally.
So, okay, I think I've got a better understanding of how it comes together and what's in it, but what is it for? Like, why do I want an SBOM? Who is anyone actually looking at it?
That's the much, much more interesting question.
Okay, good.
So we're in this like fun state, and full disclosure, I cover mostly public sector. So everything from state and local governments and like K-12 education, all the way through, kind of the whole swath of the federal government.
Mhm.
And that's really where most of my experience is. And we have a lot of ideas around pulling that data, asking our vendors for it, all that good stuff. But what's getting used out of that varies so widely. So we're just storing it somewhere, which is like a valid solution. You can store stuff and maybe hope to mine some sort of data out of that later.
Mhm.
But if you're storing something and not using it, that's an interesting problem as well. But you also have really cutting edge teams that are not only using their all of their vendors' software bill of materials, but they're trying to normalize it and look at where these artifacts are running in production. So what they really want to know is something around, okay, this vulnerability just popped.
Mhm.
What's affected? And that's a really interesting problem, and that's a really valuable problem, but it's also really difficult to get at from a bunch of XML files.
Mhm.
Are there any risk or vulnerabilities associated with publishing an SBOM tied to software, or is it just normal that when you roll other people's code into your stuff, that's just public knowledge?
It is not normal yet. I don't think that everyone has a software bill of materials with their project. I don't think it shouldn't be normal. Like I think it should. Like you should definitely be able to say, like, I, Natalie, wrote this piece of software and here's all the other things that I did. Like I think of it more almost like an academic citation than really like taking on a liability.
So the vendors and people writing code don't have concerns around exposure of what the nuts and bolts that are making up their product.
I think there are still some private sector folks that are very hesitant around that still, but you're building from open source software, like what are you gaining by telling me that you're using this library for HTTP requests?
Yeah.
You're gaining the ability to say, hey, this vulnerability popped and we've patched it in version XYZ of our product.
Yeah.
So the security value of an SBOM is if there is a vulnerable piece of software out there, I can essentially look at these manifests and be like, oh, we have that in this location and we should go do something about it.
That's the hope.
Uh-huh.
Is the hardest part around a software bill of material is completeness and then tracking where that software is running. But it has so much value to just be able to say, this version of software contains all of these other things, that it prevents fire drills. And what I mean is right around 4 or 5 years ago, right before Christmas, was the log4j. Yeah, it was
the log4j.
Everyone knew I was going to go to log4j.
Everyone still has PTSD.
That was funny enough. That was my very first incident where I had moved off of incidents. So like I had done a lot of like fire drill, incident management type stuff. And I just switched jobs about 6 weeks before that and was no longer on PagerDuty, no longer on VictorOps or any of that stuff. And I was
remember, everybody I know in security, every CISO, every analyst, every IT person that managed infrastructure and servers was just, it was day, night, weekends, holidays, right around the holidays. And it was like, I think that stuck with people for a while.
Not just the timing, but do you remember why it was so bad? Like as an incident?
The vulnerability from it?
Yep.
Oh, only conceptually. You explain it.
Yeah. So not going into like how it was exploited, like it was a perfect remote code, 10 out of 10 execution. So worth a fire drill. But we had several kind of going back and forth. So if we fixed it, oh no, there's another exploit path. And then there were a lot of vendors that didn't understand that they were calling this library at this version, or one of their dependencies had. So yes, it was great that we were able to fix it quickly. And honestly, Log4j is one of those, to me, open source security success stories. Of it was patched almost immediately from disclosure. Like that was amazing. But a patch available and a patch being deployed are two very, very different problems. And that's that gap that a software bill of materials could have helped with.
Yeah,
Because
because it wasn't, I mean, everything I heard was it wasn't just about the patching, it was about figuring out where it existed, especially with all the public facing
and that's what a
service.
software bill of materials really should have been able to shine. Of like, if I knew that I had a dependency that had log4j somewhere in that, I wouldn't have to write a ton of observability or indicators of compromise rules. I wouldn't have to have 800 different scanner type results of like, hey, go. At this point, you're almost running script kiddie like pen tests against each application, hoping that you trip it, and that's not.
Oh, wow.
It's not the way that you could have been. We as an industry, like we could have been so proactive about this had we just been able to go, oh, well, we know this.
So where are we with SBOMs now and the number of organizations that are creating them and consuming them? Like if we set a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 was years ago and we didn't have anything, and 10 is full adoption and we can completely rely on SBOMs in something like a log4j. I'm assuming right now we're somewhere in the middle where we couldn't just, if a log4j happened today, we couldn't just go to our database and go, oh yeah, go patch these, 236 servers that are right here. We would still need to run some other scans. Where do you feel like we are in that?
I feel like we're in this like very promising like middle where we have a really good way to, just as an industry, we have a couple of really good paths to create SBOMs. I feel like they're becoming more and more popular among vendors to ship with SBOMs. Like I work at a vendor right now. That's our customers ask us for a software bill of materials, so of course we're going to do that. It's that's an easy win. But what happens with the use? Like we're at a good point where we can generate them. But how are we using them as consumers of software? Like that's a much harder problem. And I'm excited to see where we go as an industry with it.
I think that's where Drew's question about are people using it?
Yeah,
what's happening?
So I can see the log4j is a great use case, but does this mean like an SBOM is something that would be consumed by your vulnerability management team or your threat hunting team or your developers, or who's going to be like, go check the SBOM?
I'm not sure yet. I don't think anyone is. I have absolutely seen folks pull software bill of materials and put them into basically they're trying to normalize a database across all of these different ecosystems and all of these different vendors and map that with all of their vulnerability feeds. To go everywhere that this new CVE, it affects all of these versions. What am I running and where are all of those versions? But data normalization and data hygiene is a really hard problem. And when you account for just the sheer volume of packages available on that one database for just like all of the things that could be in an SBOM, and then all of the things that could be in a CVE, and know that both of those are expanding so quickly, like it's a tough nut to crack.
Meaning that the conventions in a CVE may not sort of line up with the conventions in an SBOM so that I have this vulnerability? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you're going to add another dimension of, is this vulnerability exploitable?
Right.
So is this where I've had a few friends at vendors talk about, Vex. Is this where something like Vex comes in?
Yes. Yep, it is. That is exactly what is this vulnerability, and what is the path for that vulnerability exploit to occur?
And
Vex you have to explain what
vulnerability
exchange format.
Exchange format. Oof. Something like that. Yeah. All right. This time I remember the letters.
Yes, it's the vulnerability exploitability exchange. It's a mouthful. But it's a really, really promising project to understand and honestly try to just make sense of the CVE noise. It's great that I have 800 CVEs that are in a piece of software that's only applicable to Windows, but if I have no Windows machines in my fleet, does it matter?
So it helps add context to the vulnerability.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
you've got the SBOM, which is all the pieces, parts that are inside of the software, but then you have the vulnerability database and then some type of context for the vulnerability to map to your infrastructure and uses.
Yes.
And that makes sense. That makes sense. But it does sound like the further we go down that chain of granular information, the less we have of it.
Yes, we have more information, but making sense of that information becomes the like harder problem.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's still so much better to be proactive than it is to try to run scans against your infrastructure and go, well, hopefully I'm not vulnerable because it doesn't look like I have that path installed. So
Well, and
I
half
think
of
we're
the
good.
organizations don't even have an accurate asset inventory of any piece of their infrastructure anyway. So that like they think they might be scanning the whole thing and they're scanning 60% of it.
Yes, and that's, the foundation of literally everything we're talking about is inventory. And it is the least fun, least funded, and most critical part of your cybersecurity program.
It really is. So I'm going to ask a really 101 level question here. So for an enterprise or an organization or an agency who's consuming SBOMs, if they've got their, you said Cyclone DX is one format, SPDX is another one.
Mhm.
So they're getting all of this from their vendors, and then they do what? They put it where? They do what? Like what? Is this a text file living somewhere? Is it a database? Are there SaaS platforms for managing this?
There are starting to be some SaaS platforms trying to make use and solve this problem.
Mhm.
But yeah, right now a lot of what I see is homegrown of like, well, we're ingesting this file and we're putting it in a database and we'll be able to query that later. And
Okay.
that's actually not a bad place to be in.
Yeah. I
It's
just
still
kind of imagine because it sounds like right now an organization would have to be either mature enough or have enough internal coding and development people to be able to make use of this without some help.
yeah, it's a tough nut to crack still. Like it just is.
So we
'Cause,
need like SBOMs and VEXes as a service. Like just outsource a man, just say, send all of my bombs over there and let somebody else deal with it.
I imagine there is somewhere
Somebody's doing it.
a whole
Somebody's doing
slew of the whole next crop of Y Combinator folks are doing that with AI sprinkles on top.
Of course. For sure.
Oh man, don't get me started on the AI. Okay. Well, this time it was Natalie that said it first, not Drew. Usually it's Drew.
Let's pause for a quick word from sponsor Meter. Meter delivers full stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular to leading enterprises. It's a single integrated solution with everything included, and I mean everything. ISP procurement, security, routers, switches, wireless APs, firewalls, cellular, power, DNS security, VPN, SD-WAN, and multi-site workflows. Meter has designed the hardware, written the firmware, and built the software. It's a truly integrated solution. And alongside their partners, Meter designs, deploys, and manages everything required at your site or sites so that you get performant, reliable, and secure connectivity. If you're ready for fast, secure, and scalable connectivity without the complexity of managing multiple providers or tools, it's time to check out Meter. Go to meter.com/packetprotector to book a demo now. That's meter.com/packetprotector to book a demo. Thanks to Meter for being a sponsor, and now back to the podcast.
So we've seen some like supply chain attacks recently, GitHub, which of course you're familiar with, and NPM packages. So what about some of the open source projects? Does this still apply?
Yeah, of course. Just because you have the source available doesn't mean that you're not also pulling in other people's projects. So you can and absolutely should, as an open source maintainer, generate a software bill of materials. It's completely free when you're in an open source project. There are all manner of, the commercial tools in this space have free for open source users.
And you mentioned, I think, Red Hat and was it Debian that produce SBOM? So is it sort of commonplace?
No. They have a package database that's internal.
Package
it's
database.
not a
Okay. Not an SBOM.
that's fundamentally like how dpackage or yum or DNF or apt-get like all of those, like how do you install software in Linux?
Mhm.
It knows what's installed because of that database.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So open source projects could have an SBOM, should have an SBOM, but is it, how common is it? Like for the big ones that are being widely used?
I'm not sure. I I have a feeling like I could like search GitHub and see like who's distributing a software bill of materials.
Hmm.
But I have no idea offhand. But I am very hesitant, especially from a vendor point of view, but also as someone who actively contributes stuff on open source software, to
Hmm.
should all over anyone's project. like, like, I mean, like what I mean is like open source maintainers owe you nothing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Like this is software that folks are doing in their free time for fun, for
Or they're
any
not free
number of
time.
yes,
Just,
yes. Like
yeah.
if you want to know who I am, and that's part of your regulatory compliance, you can cut me a check. It's called a W-2. It's an employment form. Um, like otherwise, just take what you get off GitHub and call it a day. Be
Hmm.
grateful. You could say thank you. Like
Hmm.
I love thank yous.
Do you have like the virtual tip jar thing for coffee and tea?
No, no, I
No.
don't.
Okay. Yeah. Obviously, yes. Open source developers are doing God's work and shouldn't be compelled to do even more. So that point is well taken. I guess part of the issue is though is that software is also so widely used and shows up in so many places that it does seem like they should be getting some help with a project like this.
Yeah, it's a tragedy of the commons.
Hmm.
A lot of people with opinions and not a lot of people opening pull requests to help. Um, but
So
there are tools available if you want to bring an SBOM into your project, generate that as part of your builds, etc. Most commercial tools have a free for open source.
And wasn't it GitHub, Drew, recently we covered that started doing a little bit more like developer authentication, trying to work some other workflows into making sure people are kind of identified uniquely in a way that ties them to a human instead of being an anonymous entity over here. Was that GitHub?
I mean, GitHub definitely did a lot around asking for multi-factor authentication and then, quite a bit of mandating it as well for more common projects.
Okay,
mhm.
thought that was it.
I think it's turned on universally now, where everyone in GitHub.com has to have a second form of auth. But I could be wrong right now. So
That sounds right. Let's talk about validating SBOMs because we, like kind of swinging from open source where you get what you pay for and just be thankful that, you got anything, whether it's open source or not. Like, do we validate SBOMs? Whose job is it to make sure they're accurate and complete? And where does that
oh
fit in?
boy, completion's like a really hard problem. That's you just keep like pulling this like infinite can of
But
worms
I
here.
know, but if they're not complete, like how do you rely on this to save your butt if something happens, if it's not complete, if you can't trust it wholly?
Or
Then it's
not
just then
necessarily
it's
even
just a
complete, but just it's accurate. That for this instance, we did
yeah.
find we did accurately report all of the components in the software package.
I feel like most of the like generate a software bill of materials tools are pretty straightforward.
Hmm.
The where you're going to get some, I'm going to say differences of like technical opinion is like how deep does that software bill of materials go and how deep can it go based on your build process? Or, if you have no knowledge of the build process, you just have the finished product at the end, like how much can it know about something?
Hmm.
But going back to the hardest problem in cybersecurity being inventory, like
Mm.
how do you know what you're running is matching the SBOMs that you put in that database?
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's the,
are there tools again back to complete ignorance with developing code at all? Like I quit programming at QBasic. Um so when you're making something, are there tools that scrape or analyze and then tell you what's in there, or do you manually do it? And then what happens if you rev something up in your code? Do you have to go manually update the SBOM?
No, so the tools to generate a software bill of materials are typically really good at scanning an artifact, or being part of your build process to say, hey, these are all the things that went in there. The hard part is the humans on the implementing side going, I have these two things that go together. I've updated one. Did I update the other? And that's really where like an operational maturity of like, do you gate access to production? Do you have checks? Like how does code go from your developers in-house to a production environment? What where is that getting defined? How do you know what's actually being deployed? Because that's another automated process. You could just say, hey, I know I just cut version 0.2. I have a software bill of materials for what I just cut. The same code that's promoting it here, like actually like moving it through my AWS environments. Can that same step grab that software bill of materials and put it in that lovely store of data that we're going to normalize and understand at some point?
We've been talking about SBOMs in the context of sort of commercial software that I buy from a vendor. If I'm writing software in-house that I'm consuming internally, does it make sense to have an SBOM there too? Or is it more like, well, if there's a problem, I can just go ask the developers?
I mean, as long as they work there.
And they're not on vacation.
They're not on vacation, and they're not, I'm not on pager duty right now, so I'm going to be completely AFK for a hot minute while I go enjoy something. Yes, I feel like in-house developed software is actually where a software bill of materials can shine. So that allows you to understand, what goes in the software that you're consuming. That's part of your software inventory.
Another question, we're seeing software releases happen more and more frequently. Is it necessary that I have a new SBOM every time there's like a 0.001 release, or what is the cadence I should expect for an SBOM if I'm a consumer, if I'm buying commercial software?
Every release should have an SBOM.
Every
Like
release, okay.
Yeah, that should be a 1-to-1.
So okay. So how do we get the new one? I am so operationally intrigued by this. How do you operationalize
it? It really depends on how you're asking it and what the vendor does.
Okay. Like what have you seen out in the real world?
I am a huge fan of APIs because I can say, hey, I'm going to download this new release, and everything else for that SBOM is available on this secondary API, and that's lovely and great. But I've also seen other vendors that'll have basically like an upload portal where you just like upload random JSON files. And I can't imagine that anyone is doing that at every single release.
Yeah.
So it does sound like then if you're going to try to use SBOMs effectively, you want to build out a process for consuming every rev of an SBOM.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. You should absolutely be able to understand the inventory of software you have. And operational excellence is difficult, but that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile.
Yeah. A question just off the top of my head. Is there a level of organizational maturity where I should be, we've been talking about like struggling just with basic inventory. And if I don't have even a good grasp on my inventory, should I be worried about SBOMs or just start with my inventory first? Like, is there an operational maturity stage where SBOMs should become something that I'm thinking about?
If you're trying to download them manually and put them on a shared drive to never see again, I don't know if that's really a valuable way to get anything out of a file of any sort, not just a software bill of materials. So, I mean, yeah, there's probably some level of organizational like maturity of just understanding what software you have, what systems you have, and that way you can understand and get value from that file. I'm not a big fan of, files have value in and of themselves. Like,
sure,
it does have value, but you need to know what you have in order to be able to query that and get any meaningful insights out of it.
So In your experience, is the SBOM process typically owned more by security or more by developers, or should it be a partnership, or how does that work? Because it seems like somebody's got to kind of like own this and run this.
It's the gamut. I've seen more like GRC, like governance, risk, and compliance folks kind of
Okay.
run software bill of materials. I've
Uh-huh.
seen security try to run with it. I've seen developer shops, just the actual like I'm writing and shipping code folks try to run with it. And I think this is one of those really fun problems because it crosses all of those boundaries. Like it's not an easily siloed problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like
Right.
where is it? Who cares enough to do the work, and where is it going to get the funding and attention and the ongoing care and feeding that it needs?
That's an organizational, that's a people problem.
Aren't most security
That's
problems actually
where
people
all
problems
our
at some
problems
point?
live.
As someone who has absolutely clicked on the phishing emails, yes. It happened once. It was like 7:30 in the morning. I just got to the office because I was going to come in early and leave a little early. And I see an email at the top. I click the link, and then I immediately DM the guy in security running the phishing campaigns going, I just saw your thing. It's 7:30 in the morning on a Monday, and I don't like you. But also, since you're in the office anyway, I'll go buy you coffee. Just please don't make me do the 1 hour training.
Yeah, don't get me started on phishing simulations. I think that's the worst waste of time and money. But anyway, I did, since we have you, and
Yeah.
I saw that you're like, first of all, I saw your pancakes con talk. So on container security. So that was cool. We'll put a link to that. But I also saw that you're going to be presenting on like FIPS and crypto coming up at one of the conferences up in DC. And I kind of wanted to ask your opinion because one of the things I keep hearing, so I'm not quite eyeballs deep, maybe waist deep in like post quantum crypto for, dealing with that world and everybody trying to figure out within infrastructure how we're going to rev up. So I'm curious because one of the things I keep hearing from people is the solution to this is going to be crypto bills of materials that accompany, every application and piece of hardware that we have. So I'm curious your thoughts on that, both as it relates to SBOMs. Is that just a subcomponent, or like holistically, is this feasible? Is it helpful? Is it doable? Or is it just rubbish?
It depends. And I hate to say it depends. But I have a bias about cryptography, and that is I love the idea of it, and it seems really, really simple in practice. And then once you actually get to implementing it, it can be really, really hard. And things that you don't really anticipate, like if you're not an expert in math, and in this particular type of math, like maybe you shouldn't be writing your own algorithms or trying to source your own entropy. Like a cryptography bill of materials would work phenomenally well in a world where everyone is using known cryptography libraries and
Are
are
they
just,
not? Are people rolling their own?
oh yes,
Oh
oh
God.
yes.
Oh, really?
Um,
Even for like you mentioned like entropy and so pseudo random number generators as well, like
yeah,
it
yeah,
and
you
cryptographic
that can,
algorithm. People are writing their own stuff.
yeah, absolutely.
Wow. But,
Or
okay.
writing their own implementations. Um,
Okay.
like, yeah, like a good example of this is RSA, the algorithm, not the conference.
Mhm.
Like, it's a really simple equation. It just is. Like, it's something that you and I could whiteboard in more or less any language that's slightly more difficult than Hello World. The problem is all of the other things around how would you attack that algorithm? So all of the things that you don't really understand and know that are taken care of for you if you use OpenSSL or
Mhm.
any number of other cryptography algorithms or sorry libraries that have a lot of eyes on them, a lot of good eyes on which algorithms are used, how are they implemented, are you looking at what's going in and out, like is it checking what sorts of entropy it's using, Like ideally, it should be as a developer, as someone who is not a cryptographer. All I want to do is call this library, say this data is coming in and it should be encrypted,
Mhm.
or this data is coming in and it should be decrypted. And I don't really want to get into the nuts and bolts of that. And in that world, a cryptography bill of materials isn't that different than a software bill of materials because you're just calling that as a library.
Mhm.
But where I've seen some really cool work trying to kind of look at static analysis results and go, well, what's maybe getting encrypted somewhere or decrypted is understanding what algorithms are in use. So we're much further away from like actually operationalizing that compared to like an SBOM.
Okay, but it could happen.
It could. It
Would you
absolutely
see
could.
a place in the SBOM formats we have now to put the libraries and
That's the
list
best
that?
thing about our SBOM formats is that they're standards committees. Um, you can cut new versions of a standard and say like, hey, we're gonna add a line in or a key for a key value pair.
Mhm.
Um, that if this library uses cryptography, here are some things that you need to know about it. And so you could look and go, oh, hey, this algorithm is not offered by this provider. But even then, I'm not like all of these things can be configured by end users as well. Like it's one level harder than a software bill of materials. But that doesn't
Yeah.
mean it's not worthwhile.
Natalie, you almost make SBOMs sound cool. I'm curious, like, I'm ever the optimist and Drew's the poo-pooer of all of the things, but what do you feel is going to happen and what's the future of SBOMs? Is it going to fizzle and be replaced with something else, or do you think this is going to pick up some momentum?
I'm actually really optimistic about the future of SBOMs. Um, we went over a ton of challenges around data normalization and all of these sources of data and are you keeping an up-to-date inventory? But this is one more piece of like, hey, having that operational excellence is really, really valuable. And here's all of the places it could have saved you time.
Mm.
So there's work involved and we're not there yet. And that's okay, but we're getting there. And we're so much further along than we were a few years ago. To me, the future's bright.
So if someone wants to get on board that optimism and maybe bring an SBOM program into their organization, do you have any advice on like who they should be talking to, how they might want to pitch it to funders or executives to get some momentum behind it?
Yeah, we kind of talked a little bit about how it wasn't an easy problem to silo.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, that also means it's not an easy program to budget for because it's not cleanly coming out of one team's budget,
Hmm.
but it definitely impacts everyone. So it impacts a security team for being able to understand what they're running everywhere. It impacts a developer team who could cut those patches that much quickly or that much quicker, sorry.
Hmm.
And an operations team for being able to move software between development and staging and production environments and have a better knowledge of what's there. So, for me, the advice on getting executive buy-in for an SBOM program would be continue the business value. Like it's
Hmm.
not just a compliance check. It's something that could actually drive real value for your business or drive more impact to your mission. Yeah, I'm more of a public sector guy, but
So there's a sort of resiliency or business continuity kind of story here, as opposed to just another GRC checklist.
yes, 100%. No one has fun with GRC checklists, but making sure your house is clean and in order is definitely valuable. Like
Yeah.
this is one of those things that it's still valuable, even if it's not always the most fun.
Excellent. Well, if folks want to find you online, are you blogging? Are you on LinkedIn? What's a good way for folks to see what
I
you're up to?
I am. I have a blog at some-natalie.dev, and I am on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to send me a connect request.
Awesome. We'll have those links in the show notes. And we'll also drop in a link, the previous episode we did with you, episode 68, where we talked about Kubernetes risks. So, Natalie, loved having you back. We have to have you back for more. This was great. Really appreciate your time for being here and walking us through all the positivity around SBOMs. I'm going to try to be less cynical, JJ.
Just smile when you say it. And it'll sound positive.
That's right. Well, thanks again, Natalie, for being here. And thanks to you, the listener, for joining us for another episode of Packet Protector. If you have a topic you want us to cover or a comment, a correction, or question on anything you've heard, please reach out to us at packetpushers.net/FU. The FU is for follow-up, and we really do appreciate when listeners reach out, and we do take comments seriously. And just to let you know, Packet Protector is part of a much larger Packet Pushers podcast network, which includes now 14 technical podcasts for your professional development on networking, security, IPv6, DevOps, and more. We've also got an industry blog, 2 weekly newsletters, a community Slack group, a YouTube channel, and even an IRC group. You can find it all at packetpushers.net, free with no login required. As always, thanks for listening.